How many licenses are is there a moratorium on licenses, and how much are licenses going for? Because about 2 years ago at MJ BizCon in Vegas, somebody was trying to offload a partial license for 5 million. I thought that was a lot, and then coming to find out 20 million wasn't out of the norm for if you were in Phoenix, for example.
Yeah, you won't be able to do. There's nothing out there for 5 million anymore. That I think part of that is just in anticipation of the initiative this year, the legalization initiative passing. You won't be able to find anything for that cheap, believe it or not, without a lot of hair on it. With tax problems or lawsuits or something like that. Right now, I know the cheapest dispensary license that's currently up for sale is asking for 8 million, and that's strictly on it's a paper license without any operation in place yet.
Just for the paper.
Yeah, just for the paper. We have a couple licenses like that left over from the 2016 application process. Haven't done anything with it, just the paper, literally. So no operations, no sales.
That's the only way in, though, because they're not doing any more. They're not taking any more. They're not issuing any more licenses, at least for the medical. Let's then turn to the new ballot initiative that's coming up this fall. Is it the same style of the vertical super license? And if so, how many are going to be on the table?
It's the same style. Again, there are separate testing licenses.
Mm-hmm.
We're also, the department is going to issue, I believe, beginning in 2024, begin issuing delivery licenses, which will be separate from the vertically integrated marijuana establishment license. But we'll be limited in the number of licenses to the same number as are issued under the Medical Marijuana Act, with preference being given to existing dispensaries. The exception to that is there are 25 additional licenses that will be added to supposedly social equity licenses, although the act is very vague about who might qualify, other than someone who comes from a community that was unfairly impacted by marijuana prohibition in the past. I guess the Department of Health, the same agency that's regulating the medical industry, will regulate under legalization, and they'll have to decide how to determine who those social equity licenses are going to be issued to. But other than that, other than those 25, it'll really be just the dispensaries in existence presently under the Medical Act who will be eligible for the recreational dispensary license. Now, having said that, the department does owe us a few new medical licenses, probably maybe in the order of 8. Right now, we're tied to 10% of the registered pharmacies in the state of Arizona. That's the limit on the number of dispensaries that we can have. So as the number of registered dispensaries slowly increases, so does the number of licenses that the department has to allow. We pick up maybe 1 or 2 a year. So the department's not going to do a whole application process for 1 or 2 a year, but after a few years, I don't know when, hopefully soon, they might, when they accumulate maybe a dozen, which shouldn't take that much longer, maybe a new application process, and those will go out. Anyone will be eligible to apply for those.
For the medical, though, but not for the adult use.
Well, if they can apply for the medical, then they would also then be eligible to apply for the adult use, because the adult use number is also restricted to 10% of the registered pharmacies.
Interesting. So let's then talk about how the application process, because it appears that there's just one adult use license and just one medical license in Arizona. What types of steps do you have to go through to qualify or to apply for an Arizona cannabis business license?
Well, right now, we don't have any you can't apply right now. When that does come back around, the answer to that question is it's uncertain, because we have had the first application process in 2012 was basically a lottery. You met certain requirements, and then you're tossed into a lottery, basically. The second time around, it really wasn't a lottery. It was whoever picked the proposed location that turned out to have the most patients in a 10-mile radius. They won, which is very different. This next round could be the same, or it could come up with some different formula. It's impossible to tell at this time. So how you apply for this next round, it's unknown.
especially with the social equity applicant principles of it, because that makes it, well, again, if you have that social equity member on your team, you do, or if you don't, you don't. And that might allow you to be entered into a lottery. Illinois kind of pivoted, and like they just created a lottery and they added it to the law. And so I think the reason for that was because they are trying to avoid lawsuits, as they had 700 applications for 75 dispensary licenses, but they applied 4,000 times because they're trying to hack the system and where the location's going to be. So they have to judge these 4,000 applications, and certainly there's going to be a lot of ties. And so then when there is a tie, then they'll have a lottery. So now it looks like it's similar to the sense of Arizona, where you have to meet this criteria, but that criteria might have to be an exceedingly high score. And then you're placed into a lottery because you've tied with people, and there might be more ties than there are available seats. And so then they just start picking numbers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know. I don't like that system. I like it in the sense that it gives maybe people who are maybe less qualified, less financially backed, an opportunity to get into the industry. So it seems like it's maybe more equitable in that sense. But on the other hand, it doesn't necessarily result with the best candidates. And if what we're trying to do is service the consumer, then you would think that it shouldn't be left to lottery. It should be left to a choice of who would make the best product. But there's pros and cons, I think, to both approaches. But
the cost is an interesting one. And then the cost from, like, we're lawyers, and so we probably shouldn't to speak ill of litigation, but a lot of it can be chicanery. A lot of it. And being on the business side now, I'm like, well, this is a lot more practical. But anyway, the whole point of having that type of lottery-based system is just so much more difficult to appeal because it is, quote unquote, merit-based in the score. And the score is done by like KPMG in the state of Illinois. So you have a big four accounting firm that, their rubric that they made up, that is indicative of how good the person's going to perform. Really? I don't know about that. And then I also don't know what that rubric is. So maybe that's, if that score is somewhat of a standardization. And so then after you have that standardization, if you have more people who fit the criteria than available licenses, how do you justly award those and avoid litigation risk? Because if you start giving them to, political friends and favors, and then somebody like me will say, all right, well, let's go to the administrative review section of the Illinois law. We'll sue him. And then we serve discovery on KPMG, and we get to the bottom of how this algorithm works.
You're right. It definitely makes it easier for the government to avoid litigation that way, because they can kind of throw their hands up and say, what, it was a lottery. We even saw, though, in the 11th hour before the initial dispensary applications were selected, that people were being knocked out for really very technical reasons, or reasons which weren't even true, just knocked out in the 11th hour of the lottery, until there was and that would happen where there'd be only, one applicant standing in that particular
in
the lottery, because we had a whole bunch of different little lotteries, because it was done by certain districts in the state. So 131 districts in the state that each had their own separate lottery. So somehow people are getting knocked out for reasons that didn't appear to be valid in the 11th hour. Like a day or two before the lottery, without any opportunity to try to correct or anything like that. So
no administrative review.
Yeah, no administrative review. Too late. You could file administrative review. Sure, you could do that. But the licenses were already issued. Good luck. Nobody prevailed in any lawsuit challenging the application.
You guys have licenses in the tank? Like Illinois has a set number of licenses, and they're giving away this much. So it's like, hey, they haven't spoken about like 200 of those licenses over there. Let's sue them and try to get one.
Well, I like that. That would make sense. So if somebody did, make a successful challenge, that they have another license to peel off and give to them. But, that's not the case in Arizona. We do have some in the tank right now. Obviously, as the number of pharmacies increases in Arizona, so do the number of licenses that are supposed to be issued. But other than that, no, we didn't hold back. I like the idea of holding back because, I think there were some people who unfairly were precluded from the initial selection process here in Arizona. But like you said, chicanery.
Mm-hmm. Well, co-host of the show, Miggy's watching. He asks, will Arizona be vertically integrated?
Yeah, well, it is. It is vertically integrated now. It will be vertically integrated under if we pass, and I think we will in this year, November, recreational. It'll also be vertically integrated. So
how do you allocate then your capital? Because if it's going to be a vertically integrated license, but then you describe this issue of a sub-license. So if I'm just going to be getting my license so that I can handle retail, my overhead is substantially lower than if I'm going to be getting my license to, because I have seen some amazing greenhouses out of Arizona, just huge greenhouses in Arizona. That costs way more to set up than a retail outlet that's 2,000 square feet.
Right. Yeah. The way, the contracts have kind of gone through different permutations. Right now, it seems like the preferred structure of contract for a sub license is to have the person, the sub licensee, the third party company, pay a set amount to kind of lease that license. For example, you have a grower come in. He pays maybe $30,000 a month, $40,000 a month directly to the dispensary license holder for the privilege of growing under that license. And then everything that grower produces that's sold, either wholesale or retail, the revenue then goes to the grower. So, that's it makes it easier for the license holder. They know exactly how much money they're going to get every month. They don't have to deal with divvying anything up. So they decide how much they want per month, and then the rest from the sales goes back to the grower. That's sort of the preferred contract model right now.